Get your hands off me!
You're coming with me. Officer, please!
Let go!
Move!
1938. A cop slapped Bumpy Johnson's sister in front of 30 witnesses. Bumpy didn't fire a single shot. 72 hours later, that cop was destroyed. How do you break a man without ever touching him to understand how it all led here? We go back to where it truly began. August 17th, 1938. The Cotton Club back room at 2 in the afternoon. Bumpy Johnson sat across from a man who had made the mistake of stealing from the wrong people. Between them, a chessboard. 16 white pieces, 16 black pieces, and a debt that could only be paid in blood or betrayal. The man's name was Marcus Webb. 3 days ago, he had pocketed $500 meant for Bumpy's numbers operation. Now he sat sweating through a shirt that cost more than the money he stole, watching Bumpy move a black knight with fingers steady as a surgeon's hand. "Your move," Bumpy said without looking up. Marcus reached for his bishop, hand shaking hard enough to knock over his king. He set the piece upright, moved the bishop 2 squares. A terrible move. The kind of move a desperate man makes when he knows the game is already over. Bumpy smiled without warmth. "You see the problem with stealing, Marcus? It is not the money. Money I can replace. The problem is what it says about your judgment. You looked at me, looked at my operation, and decided the risk was worth the reward. That tells me you cannot calculate odds. That tells me you are dangerous to yourself and everyone around you." Marcus swallowed. His throat clicked loud enough to hear across the table. "I will pay it back. Every cent. I swear to God. Bumpy. I will pay it back with interest." "Interest, Bumpy moved his queen, placed her 3 squares from Marcus's exposed king. "What interest rate do you think applies to betrayal? 10%? 20? How do you calculate the cost of making me look weak in front of every number runner in Harlem?" The room smelled like cigar smoke and furniture polish, and the particular scent of fear that comes from a man who knows he is sitting across from his own death. Marcus opened his mouth to answer. The telephone on the side table rang. Sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. Bumpy held up one finger. "Wait." He picked up the receiver, held it to his ear. "Yes." The voice on the other end belonged to Tommy Reed. Bumpy had known Tommy since they were both 15 years old, running numbers for Dutch Schultz before Bumpy decided working for white men was a young man's mistake. Tommy did not call unless the world was ending or about to. "We got a problem." Tommy's voice carried the weight of something heavy, something that could not be put down gently. "It is about Mabel." Bumpy's face did not change. The hand holding the receiver did not tighten. But something shifted in the air of the room. Something Marcus felt even through his own terror. The quality of silence changed from threatening to absolute. "What about Mabel?" "Cops slapped her. West 126th Street, right in front of Peterson's Market. Maybe 30 people watching. Split her grocery bag all over the sidewalk and made her pick it up while he stood there laughing." Bumpy set the receiver down. Not hung up. Set down. Still connected. Tommy still breathing on the other end, waiting for instructions that would determine how the next 72 hours unfolded. Bumpy looked at Marcus Webb. Really looked at him for the first time since the chess game started. "Stand up." Marcus stood, knees shaking hard enough to make his trouser legs tremble. "You just got lucky, Marcus. Not because I forgive you, not because I forgot what you did, but because something more important than you just walked through my door. Take your king off the board. Go home. Send me the 500 by midnight tomorrow. After that, we never speak again. You leave Harlem. You find work somewhere else. You forget my name and I forget yours. Do you understand?" Marcus grabbed his king, clutched it like a drowning man clutching driftwood. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Bumpy. Thank you." "Do not thank me. Thank my sister. She just saved your life without knowing it. Bumpy picked up the receiver. "Now get out!" Marcus ran. Actually ran. The door slammed behind him hard enough to rattle the bottles behind the bar. Bumpy brought the phone back to his ear. "I am still here. What do you want me to do?" Tommy asked. "Nothing yet. I need to see it first. I need to understand what happened before I decide how it ends." What Marcus Webb would never know, what he would never understand even if he lived to be 100 years old, was that Bumpy Johnson had been about to break his fingers one by one until he confessed where the money went and who helped him steal it. The chess game was not a game. It was theater, a performance designed to make Marcus believe he still had a chance, right up until the moment Bumpy took it away. But Mabel changed the equation. Mabel, who had raised Bumpy after their mother died, who had worked 2 jobs to keep him in school, who had never asked him for anything except to stay alive and stay out of prison. Someone had put hands on her. Someone wearing a badge had decided that a black woman in Harlem was something he could slap around in public without consequences. That someone had made a calculation error that would cost him everything he thought a badge protected. The story of what happened on West 126th Street reached Bumpy through 5 different sources before he left the Cotton Club. Each version added details the others missed. Each narrator understood they were not just reporting an incident. They were lighting a fuse attached to something that would reshape how police operated in Harlem for the next 30 years. An 8-year-old boy named Samuel was the first witness. He had been standing outside Peterson's Market with his mother, Clara, waiting while she counted pennies to see if they had enough for milk and bread. Samuel saw the whole thing, saw Officer Patrick Callahan step into Mabel Johnson's path, saw the challenge in his posture, saw Mabel try to move around him twice before Callahan's hand came up fast and caught her across the face with enough force to snap her head sideways. The grocery bag hit the pavement. Oranges rolled into the gutter. A jar of grape preserves exploded against the curb. Purple syrup spreading across concrete like a wound that would not stop bleeding. Samuel watched Mabel stand there with a red handprint blooming on her cheek, waiting for Callahan to decide if he was finished. 30 people watched. The barber, the domino players, the women on the stoop, the old man at the window with his coffee. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Clara grabbed Samuel's hand, pulled him away fast. Not running, but moving with purpose. The kind of movement that says we need to be anywhere except here right now. She leaned down, whispered in his ear as they turned the corner onto Lenox Avenue. "Do not look back, baby, do not look back. That man just killed himself and does not know it yet." Samuel did not understand. He was 8 years old. He understood that the policeman had hit Miss Johnson. He understood that his mother was scared. But he did not understand why she said the policeman was dead when he was still standing there laughing, telling Mabel to pick up her mess and get out of his sight. What Samuel could not see, what only 5 other people in that crowd of 30 could see, was the documentation happening from 5 different angles. A photographer named James, standing in a second-floor window with a camera. A shop owner named Ruth watching from behind her counter, memorizing every detail. A street sweeper named Moses who worked for Bumpy's numbers operation, mentally recording the time, the weather, the exact words Callahan used. A woman named Delilah sitting in a car across the street, taking notes in a small leather book. A teenager named Marcus, no relation to Marcus Webb, standing in a doorway with instructions to follow Callahan after he left and document everywhere he went for the next 6 hours. Callahan did not know he was being watched by Bumpy Johnson's eyes, did not know that before the preserves finished spreading across the sidewalk. 5 people were already compiling a file that would be thicker than his personnel record by midnight. Did not know that the slap he thought made him look strong in front of a crowd actually made him look like prey in front of predators who had been waiting for an excuse. He walked away smiling. The smile of a man who thinks he just won something, the smile of a man who has never learned that some victories cost more than losing ever could. By the time Bumpy arrived at the scene 40 minutes later, the crowd had dispersed. The preserves were still there, drying in the August heat, flies gathering around the sweetness. Bumpy stood at the exact spot where Mabel had stood. He looked up at James's window, looked across at Delilah's usual parking spot, looked at the doorway where Marcus had been stationed, counted sight lines, calculated angles, built a three-dimensional map in his mind of who saw what from where. Tommy stood 3 feet behind him, waiting. "The cop," Bumpy said without turning around. "Name: Patrick Callahan, Precinct 28, 31 years old, 6 years on the Harlem beat, reputation for putting hands on people, 3 complaints filed, all dismissed, lives in Queens, drinks at Sullivan's in the Bronx, owes money to bookies in 3 different neighborhoods." Bumpy nodded once, the kind of nod that says, "I asked and you delivered, and now the real work begins." "Gather them. Tonight, 9 o'clock. The usual place. All 7. Tommy's eyebrows went up. "All 7. You sure you want to pull in the full council for this?" "A cop slapped my sister in front of 30 witnesses. He did it in public because he wanted to send a message. Now I send one back. But not just to him. To every cop in this city who thinks a badge means they can put hands on our people without paying for it. This is not about revenge, Tommy. This is about education. By the time I'm finished, every officer in the NYPD will know there are lines you do not cross. And the first line is my family." The decision to convene the Council of 7 was not made lightly. The council existed in the shadows of Harlem's power structure. 7 individuals who each controlled a crucial piece of the neighborhood's operations. They rarely met all together. The last time all 7 had gathered in the same room was 2 years ago when Dutch Schultz tried to move back into Harlem after the Italians pushed him out of the Bronx. That meeting lasted 20 minutes. Schultz left Harlem and never came back. 3 weeks later, he was dead in a New Jersey chop house. But that was a different story involving different players. Tonight's meeting would be longer. Tonight's meeting would chart the course of 72 hours that would redefine what it meant to wear a badge in Harlem. The 7 arrived separately. Tommy Reed came first, walking through the back entrance of the Cotton Club at 8:45. Ray Chambers arrived next. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked like a librarian but ran the most sophisticated information network in Manhattan. Jerome Davidson followed, the only lawyer in Harlem who could argue a case in front of white judges and win. Clara Washington. Samuel's mother and the dispatcher at Precinct 28 slipped in through the side door at 8:55 wearing a coat over her uniform. Delilah Monroe arrived at 9 exactly. The woman who ran numbers out of 3 speakeasies and maintained connections with the Italian families. Marcus Hayes, the teenager from the doorway, showed up at 9:02 with a notebook full of Callahan's movements. And finally, at 9:05, an older man named Solomon Hayes walked in, moving slow like every step cost him something. Solomon was the oldest member of the council. He had been in Harlem since before the Great War, before the neighborhood became what it was now. He rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened because Solomon Hayes had survived longer than anyone had a right to survive in their profession. Bumpy sat at the head of the table, not because he demanded it, because the 7 chairs arranged themselves that way naturally, the way water flows downhill, the way power settles into place when everyone agrees where it belongs. On the table in front of him, a single bullet, brass casing catching the light from the bulb overhead, a .45 caliber round that could end a life in less than a second if someone chose to use it that way. Bumpy let them settle into their chairs, let them see the bullet, let them wonder what it meant and where this conversation was going, when the room was completely quiet, when even the sound of breathing seemed too loud. He spoke. Who thinks I should use this? 7 people looked at the bullet. 7 people understood the question was not about ammunition. It was about philosophy. It was about whether Bumpy Johnson, the man who had built an empire in Harlem without declaring war on the police, was about to break his own rules. Nobody spoke. Nobody reached for the bullet. Nobody suggested that violence was the answer, because everyone in that room had lived long enough to know that bullets solve problems for 5 minutes and create problems that last for years. Bumpy picked up the bullet, held it between thumb and forefinger like he was examining something precious and useless at the same time. Good, because the man who put hands on my sister is going to wish I used this. A bullet makes you a victim. What I have planned makes you a lesson. He put the bullet in his pocket, stood, walked to a chalkboard on the wall that usually displayed betting odds for horse races, picked up a piece of chalk and drew a triangle. At the top, he wrote Mayor. Below that, Police Commissioner. Below that, Captain Reynolds. Below that, Sergeant O'Brien. At the bottom, in letters bigger than the rest, Officer Patrick Callahan. This, Bumpy said, tapping the triangle, is a pyramid. Power flows down from top to bottom. The mayor does not know Callahan exists. The commissioner might have seen his name on a report once. Captain Reynolds knows him, tolerates him, lets him operate because Callahan brings in numbers even if his methods are questionable. Sergeant O'Brien protects him because they came up through the academy together and cops protect their own. That protection is the only thing keeping Callahan employed. He drew a line under Callahan's name, then another, then a third, until the bottom of the pyramid was crossed out completely. I am not going to touch the top. I am not going to threaten the mayor or the commissioner or even Captain Reynolds. I am going to remove the foundation. Every support structure holding Callahan up gets taken away. And when there is nothing left holding him, the whole pyramid collapses down on top of him and crushes him under weight he cannot escape. Ray leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. How do you remove a foundation without the structure noticing? You do it piece by piece. You do it quietly. You make each piece look like an accident, a coincidence, bad luck. By the time anyone realizes it was deliberate, the damage is already done and there is no one to blame because we never touched him directly. Bumpy turned back to the board, started writing names next to each level of the pyramid. Names of people who owed money. Names of people with secrets. Names of people whose cooperation kept the system running smoothly. Clara, you work dispatch. Starting tomorrow morning, every call Callahan responds to gets delayed. Wrong addresses, conflicting information, witnesses who suddenly cannot remember what they saw. Make him look incompetent without making it obvious you are the one doing it. Clara nodded once. How long? 72 hours. By Friday afternoon. Either Callahan is gone or we escalate. But I do not think we will need to escalate. 72 hours of systematic failure will be enough. He turned to Jerome. You file complaints. Anonymous. Detailed. Impossible to ignore. Sergeant O'Brien has been skimming evidence room seizures to pay for his kids' private school. Internal Affairs has suspected it for months but cannot prove it. You give them proof. Receipts. Dates. Testimony from people who saw it happen. Once O'Brien is under investigation, he cannot protect Callahan. And without O'Brien, Callahan is exposed. Jerome pulled out a pen, started taking notes. What if O'Brien tries to make a deal, gives up something bigger to save himself? Then he gives up Callahan. Either way, Callahan loses his protection. That is the point. Delilah spoke next, her voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had grown up speaking Italian before English. The families will not like disruption. Costello has shipments coming through the bridge. If police start cracking down, it affects everyone's money. That is exactly why this works, Bumpy said. I am going to make cooperation impossible. Every witness goes blind. Every informant goes deaf. The precinct clearance rate drops to nothing. When Costello's shipments get delayed, when his drivers get arrested, when his money stops flowing. He makes a phone call. He tells the people downtown that Harlem is no longer profitable. And when enough people lose enough money, the department will sacrifice Callahan to restore order. He is just one cop. The system will cut him loose to save itself. Solomon Hayes spoke for the first time since entering the room. His voice sounded like gravel rolling down a metal chute. You are betting that the system values money more than protecting its own. I am not betting. I know. I have watched this system for 20 years. It bends when it has to. It breaks when it is profitable. And right now, making an example of Callahan is more profitable than protecting him. Ray asked the question everyone was thinking. What if he figures it out? What if Callahan realizes he is being targeted and comes after you directly? Bumpy smiled. Not the warm smile he used when greeting friends. The cold smile that appeared when he was explaining something to someone who should have already understood. He will not figure it out because dead men do not need to know who killed them. By the time Callahan understands what is happening, he will be too broken to fight back. Psychological warfare does not leave bruises you can photograph or evidence you can prosecute. It just leaves a man sitting in a dark room at 3 in the morning, wondering if every sound he hears is someone coming to finish what we started. The meeting lasted another hour. Each member of the council received specific instructions. Each instruction was designed to look isolated, unconnected to the others. Only Bumpy saw the full picture. The way each piece fit together to create a machine that would grind Callahan down to nothing without anyone being able to trace it back to a single source. By 10:30, the room was empty except for Bumpy and Tommy. They stood by the window looking out at Harlem, streetlights flickering on as darkness settled over the neighborhood like a blanket. You really think this works? Tommy asked. 72 hours to destroy a cop without touching him. It already worked, Bumpy said. The moment Callahan put his hands on Mabel, he became a target. Everything after that is just mathematics. Calculating how long it takes for the system to realize he costs more than he is worth. My estimate is 72 hours. We will see if I am right. But while Bumpy planned the systematic destruction of Patrick Callahan's career, Callahan himself sat in a bar called Sullivan's in the Bronx, drinking cheap whiskey and laughing with 2 other cops about the black woman he had put in her place that afternoon. The bar smelled like spilled beer and cigarette smoke and the particular staleness that comes from men drinking to forget instead of drinking to celebrate. Callahan sat at the corner of the bar, uniform jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, face flushed from 3 whiskeys he had finished too fast. You should have seen her face, he said, words starting to slur at the edges. Thought she could walk past me like I was nothing, like she owned the sidewalk. I put her right back where she belongs. The cop next to him, a younger officer named Patterson, laughed nervously. The kind of laugh that says, I do not think this is funny, but I'm afraid to say so. What if she files a complaint? Callahan waved the suggestion away like it was smoke. Complaint to who? Her people do not file complaints. They know better. Besides, even if she did, who is going to believe a colored woman over a cop with 6 years on the force system protects its own? What Callahan did not know, what he could not know sitting in that bar 70 blocks from Harlem, was that the system he thought would protect him was already preparing to throw him away like garbage. The foundation was cracking. The supports were being removed. And by the time he noticed, it would be too late to do anything except fall. He ordered another whiskey, drank it slow this time, felt the burn all the way down, felt good, felt powerful, felt like a man who had just reminded everyone watching that he was in charge. At 11 that night, Patrick Callahan went home to his apartment in Queens, kissed his girlfriend goodnight, and fell asleep within minutes. He did not dream. He did not wake up. He slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a man whose conscience had stopped bothering him years ago. While he slept, Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment in Harlem with a photograph of Mabel on the table in front of him. The photograph showed her smiling, taken last Christmas at a family dinner. But laid next to it was a different photograph, this one taken that afternoon by James from the second-floor window. Mabel's face, the red handprint, the shock and humiliation frozen in time. Bumpy picked up both photographs, walked to a safe built into his bedroom wall, opened it. Inside, 47 other photographs. 47 faces belonging to people who had crossed lines they should not have crossed. Some of them were still alive, living in other cities, looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Some of them were dead, buried in places where families would never find them. All of them served the same purpose. They were lessons, warnings, evidence that Bumpy Johnson did not forget and did not forgive. He placed Mabel's photographs inside, closed the safe, spun the lock, stood there in the dark apartment looking at nothing, thinking about everything. 72 hours. That was all the time Callahan had left before his world came apart. Not because Bumpy Johnson was violent, because Bumpy Johnson understood something more dangerous than violence. He understood that real power is not the ability to hurt someone. Real power is the ability to make someone hurt themselves while you watch from a distance. Hands clean, conscience clear, knowing that justice sometimes wears a different face than the law ever imagined. Bumpy walked to the window, looked out at Harlem sleeping under stars that barely penetrated the city lights. Somewhere out there, Patrick Callahan slept peacefully. Somewhere out there. Mabel sat in her apartment trying to forget the feeling of being humiliated in front of her neighbors. Somewhere out there. 7 members of the council were already making phone calls, sending messages, activating networks that would transform Harlem into a machine designed for one purpose. 72 hours. The clock was already ticking. And when it stopped, Callahan would understand that some people you just do not touch. Not because they will kill you, because they will make you wish you were dead while keeping you alive to remember why. August 18th, 1938, 6:15 in the morning. Patrick Callahan's alarm clock rattled him awake in his Queens apartment. Same sound as every other morning. Same gray light filtering through curtains that needed washing. Same girlfriend sleeping beside him, hair spread across the pillow like she had not moved all night. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. He showered, shaved, put on his uniform, checked his reflection in the mirror, saw the same face he saw every morning. A cop, 6 years on the force, a man who knew how to handle himself on the streets, a man who had put a colored woman in her place yesterday and slept like a baby afterward. The reflection did not show what was coming. Mirrors never do. By 7 o'clock, Callahan was walking into Murphy's diner on the corner of his block, same as he did 5 mornings a week. The bell over the door rang. The owner, an Irish woman named Kathleen who had been serving him coffee for 3 years, looked up from behind the counter. Something flickered across her face. Not fear exactly. Something else. Something that made her hands move just a fraction slower when she poured his coffee. Callahan sat at his usual stool. Waited. Kathleen brought the cup, set it down without the smile she usually gave him. The coffee was cold, not lukewarm, not slightly cooled. Cold, like it had been sitting in the pot since midnight. "This is cold," Callahan said. Kathleen looked at him with eyes that gave nothing away. Must have misjudged. Want me to pour you another?" "Yeah, I want you to pour me another. And make sure it is hot this time." She took the cup, walked back to the counter, poured from the same pot. Brought it back. Still cold. Callahan stared at her. She stared back. Neither of them blinked. You know what? Forget it. Callahan stood up, threw a dime on the counter, walked out. The bell rang behind him. He did not hear Kathleen pick up the phone and dial a number she had memorized the night before, did not hear her say 3 words into the receiver. He just left. Small things, meaningless things, the kind of things that happen every day to people who live in cities where a million details can go wrong without anyone planning it. That is what Callahan told himself as he drove to the precinct. The coffee was an accident. Bad luck. Nothing more. But when he walked into the precinct at 7:45, 15 minutes before his shift started, Sergeant Murphy looked up from his desk and said, "You are late." Callahan checked his watch. 7:45. Exactly the time he arrived every morning. "My shift starts at 8. Murphy tapped a paper on his desk. "Shift change got moved up. Started at 7:30 this morning. Check the board. It is posted right there." Callahan walked to the duty board, looked at the schedule. There, in Clara Washington's handwriting, his shift time changed from 8 to 7:30. He had checked this board yesterday. It said 8. He checked it every day. It always said 8. "This is wrong," Callahan said. "My shift has been 8 o'clock for 6 months. Murphy shrugged. "Says 7:30 now. You wanted to argue with the schedule, or you want to get to work? Captain Reynolds is already asking why you were not here for roll call." First small crack. First moment where the world did not line up exactly the way it should. Callahan swallowed the anger building in his throat, went to find Captain Reynolds. Explained there must have been a mistake with the schedule. Reynolds listened with a face that showed nothing, then said, "Watch yourself. Callahan, we do not tolerate officers who cannot follow simple instructions." The cracks kept spreading like frost across glass, invisible until you looked close enough to see the pattern forming beneath the surface. By noon, 3 cases Callahan had been working collapsed like buildings with no foundation. The first was a robbery at Levy's pawn shop. Callahan had a witness, an old man named Jacob who saw the whole thing, gave a description detailed enough to identify the suspect. Callahan went to bring Jacob in for a formal statement, found him sitting behind his counter acting like they had never met before. "Mr. Levy, we need you to come down to the station and give your statement about the robbery." Jacob looked up from a ledger he was writing in. "What robbery?" "The one you called in yesterday. The one where you gave me a description of the suspect." "I did not call in any robbery. I did not see any robbery. I think you have me confused with someone else." Callahan felt something twist in his stomach. "Mr. Levy, you called it in yourself. You told me the guy wore a red jacket and had a scar over his left eye." Jacob went back to his ledger. "Then I was mistaken. The light was bad. Could have been anybody. Could have been nobody. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Now get out of my shop. I have work to do." Second case, an assault on 133rd Street, where 8 people watched a man slash another man with a straight razor. Callahan had names, had addresses, spent the morning tracking down witnesses. Every single one of them suddenly could not remember a thing, did not see anything, were not even there that day. "Sorry, officer. Must be thinking of someone else." Third case, a woman who filed a report about being attacked behind a grocery store. Gave Callahan enough details to find the suspect. When Callahan went back to get her to identify him, she looked at Callahan like he was speaking a foreign language. "Nobody attacked me. I fell down some stairs. I do not know why I said different. Must have been confused. Leave me alone." By 2 in the afternoon, Callahan's clearance rate for the week was 0. 3 cases dead. 3 witnesses who recanted or disappeared or suddenly lost the ability to remember their own names. Murphy called him into the office. "What the hell is going on with your cases?" "I do not know. Witnesses are changing their stories. All of them. At the same time, 3 different cases, and every witness suddenly gets amnesia. Murphy leaned forward. That is not coincidence. Callahan, that is coordination. Someone is telling people not to cooperate with you specifically. The second crack appeared, wider than the first, deep enough to see darkness underneath. Callahan's hands started to sweat. Who would do that? Murphy looked at him like he was looking at a child who could not do simple math. You tell me. You slap anyone interesting yesterday. Anyone whose family might have influence in this neighborhood. Callahan's mouth went dry. The Johnson girl. But that was nothing. Just a colored woman who needed to learn respect. Bumpy Johnson's sister. Murphy said it flat. Factual. Like he was reading a death certificate. You put your hands on Bumpy Johnson's sister in front of 30 witnesses and you think that is nothing. I am a cop. He is a criminal. The system protects its own. Murphy stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Harlem stretching away under afternoon sun that made everything look hotter than it was. You poor stupid son of a gun. The system does not protect anyone. The system protects itself. And right now, you are making the system look bad. Your cases are falling apart. Your witnesses are disappearing. When the numbers drop, downtown starts asking questions. When downtown asks questions, heads roll. Guess whose head they are going to want? The fear. Callahan had been pushing down all day, started crawling up his spine. What am I supposed to do? Pray. Pray that Bumpy Johnson is satisfied with ruining your cases. Pray that he does not decide to escalate, and for God's sake, stay away from his family. But prayers were not enough to stop what came next because the machinery Bumpy had set in motion was already operating at full speed, grinding through the supports holding Callahan's life together one invisible bolt at a time. At 4 p.m, Callahan's phone rang. His girlfriend, her voice shaking so hard the words barely made sense through the sobbing. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not want to do this. Do what? What are you talking about? We are done. I cannot see you anymore. Do not call me. Do not come to my apartment. Just leave me alone. What? Why, what happened? Her crying got worse. Desperate. The sound of someone being forced to do something that was breaking them apart from the inside. Someone came to see me today. At work. A woman. She knew things about me. Things nobody should know. She said if I did not end this with you, those things would become public. She said people would get hurt. My family would get hurt. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I have to go. The line went dead. Callahan stood there holding the receiver, listening to dial tone, feeling the world tilt sideways. His girlfriend, the woman he had been planning to marry next spring, gone, erased from his life by a phone call and a threat he could not see or fight or understand. He tried calling back. No answer. Tried again an hour later. Still no answer. At 6 that evening, he drove to her apartment in Queens, knocked on her door. Her roommate answered, looked at him with eyes full of pity and fear. She does not want to see you. I just need to talk to her. 5 minutes. She is not here, and even if she was, she does not want to see you. You should go. The door closed in his face. Callahan stood in the hallway, listening to locks engage on the other side. 3 locks. She had never used 3 locks before. That night, Callahan sat in his apartment trying to make sense of pieces that did not fit together. Cold coffee, changed schedules, disappeared witnesses. His girlfriend gone. All of it happening in the same day. All of it happening after he slapped Mabel Johnson. But it could not be connected. That was impossible. Criminals used guns and knives and threats you could see coming. They did not orchestrate elaborate campaigns to destroy you from a dozen different angles simultaneously. The machinery was working exactly as designed, and Callahan was just beginning to understand he was caught in gears he could not see. August 19th, 24 hours into the 72-hour countdown. Frank Costello sat in his office in Manhattan looking at numbers that made his blood pressure climb into dangerous territory. 3 shipments delayed at the George Washington Bridge in the past 2 days. Drivers arrested. Product seized. Operations disrupted. All because the usual cops who waved his trucks through had suddenly stopped coming to work or started following procedure for the first time in 5 years. He picked up the phone. Dialed a number he rarely called directly. Captain Reynolds answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Costello." Reynolds' voice went tight. "Mr. Costello, what can I do for you? You can explain why my operations in Harlem have turned to garbage in the past 48 hours. You can explain why cops I pay good money to look the other way are suddenly developing a conscience. You can explain why I am losing money every hour your precinct continues to exist. There have been some complications with personnel. I do not care about complications. I care about results. Fix it. Fix it today. Or I start making phone calls to people who will fix it for you. And when they fix it, you will not have a job anymore. Or anything else. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, Mr. Costello. We understand each other." The light went dead. Reynolds sat at his desk staring at the phone like it might ring again with worse news. He understood the equation perfectly. The Italians provided political protection. Political protection kept the precinct operating. If Costello pulled that protection, downtown would shut them down and scatter everyone to desk jobs in precincts where careers went to die. He called Callahan into his office at 10 in the morning. "Sit down." Callahan sat. Reynolds did not offer coffee or small talk or any of the usual courtesies that came before difficult conversations. "What did you do to Bumpy Johnson?" "I did not do anything to Bumpy Johnson. I put his sister in her place. That is all." "His sister?" Reynolds stood up, walked to the window. "You slapped his sister in public, in front of 30 witnesses. You humiliated her on a street corner in broad daylight, and you think that is all?" "She needed to learn respect." Reynolds turned around slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were the eyes of a man watching his career burn down around him and knowing exactly who lit the match. "Let me explain something to you about power. Callahan, real power is not about who you can hit. Real power is about who can destroy you without ever touching you. Bumpy Johnson is destroying this precinct, destroying my career, destroying everyone who works here, and he is doing it without firing a shot, without making a threat, without giving us a single thing we can arrest him for. So arrest him anyway. For what? For witnesses refusing to cooperate, for dispatch making mistakes, for files getting lost. You show me the law he broke and I will arrest him. But there is no law against an entire neighborhood deciding they do not want to help us anymore." Callahan felt the fear he had been fighting since yesterday morning finally break through to the surface. "What are you saying?" "I am saying you woke up something that should have stayed asleep. I am saying Bumpy Johnson is teaching everyone in this city a lesson about what happens when you cross certain lines, and you are the example he chose to make his point. You just woke the devil up after 10 years of sleep." The conversation ended there because Reynolds' phone rang again. Another call from downtown. Another demand for explanations about why the precinct numbers looked like they had been hit by a hurricane. Reynolds picked up the receiver and Callahan walked out into a hallway that suddenly felt longer than it should. Like the distance between where he stood and where he needed to go was expanding with every step. That afternoon, Sergeant O'Brien got called into internal affairs. He went in at 1 o'clock, came out at 4:30. His face was the color of old newspaper. He walked past Callahan in the hallway without looking at him, without acknowledging he existed. O'Brien, who had covered for Callahan through 3 separate investigations, who had falsified reports to protect him, who had been his closest thing to a friend in the precinct, suddenly could not afford to be seen standing next to him. Callahan caught up to him in the parking lot. What happened? O'Brien unlocked his car, threw his jacket in the back seat. They have evidence. Real evidence. Someone filed a complaint with dates, receipts, witness statements. They know about the evidence room. They know about the money. They know everything. Who filed it? Anonymous. But it does not matter. The evidence is real. I am suspended. Probably facing criminal charges. My career is over. He got in his car, started the engine, looked at Callahan through the open window. Whatever you did, whoever you made angry, stay away from me. I cannot help you anymore. I cannot help anyone. He drove away, leaving Callahan standing in the parking lot watching taillights disappear into traffic, understanding that the last person who could protect him had just been removed from the board like a chess piece that served its purpose and was no longer needed. By Friday morning, 48 hours into the countdown, downtown had called Reynolds 6 times. O'Brien was suspended, facing criminal charges. Every case Callahan touched turned to dust. The Italians were threatening to pull political support. The precinct clearance rate had dropped 40% in 2 days. And Patrick Callahan stood in the center of it all like a man drowning in water he could not see, fighting currents he could not escape. At 9 in the morning, Reynolds called a precinct-wide meeting. Every officer not on patrol crammed into the briefing room. Reynolds stood at the front looking at faces he had worked with for years. Listen up. I'm only going to say this once. We have a problem. That problem has a name. That name is Patrick Callahan. Officer Callahan made a mistake 3 days ago. He put his hands on the wrong person's family. Now that person is teaching us a lesson about what happens when you cross certain lines in Harlem. That lesson is costing all of us. Our clearance rate is in the toilet. Downtown is threatening to shut us down. The Italians are pulling political support, all because one officer could not keep his hands to himself. Callahan stood at the back of the room feeling every eye turned toward him like searchlights. Reynolds continued. Effective immediately. Anyone who wants to keep their job will cut all ties with Callahan. Do not partner with him. Do not cover for him. Do not stand next to him in the hallway. He is radioactive, and anyone who gets contaminated goes down with him. That is all. The room emptied. Callahan stood alone watching his fellow officers walk past him like he did not exist, like he was already a ghost. Nobody met his eyes. Nobody spoke. The message was clear. He was on his own. At noon, his mother called from the Bronx. Her voice was shaking so hard he could barely understand her through the tears. Patrick, something terrible happened. What happened? Are you okay? Someone sent me a funeral wreath. It was on the front steps when I came home from church. A big wreath with flowers and a card. The card had your name on it. Just your name, nothing else. Callahan felt his stomach drop into a hole that had no bottom. Did you call the police? I did. They came. They took the wreath. They said there was nothing they could do. No return address. No evidence of who sent it. They said it was probably a prank. But Patrick, it was not a prank. Someone is telling me my son is going to die. Mom, listen to me. You are safe. This is just intimidation. They are trying to scare me. Well, it is working. I am terrified. What did you do? Who did you make angry? Callahan had no answer that would make his mother feel better. He told her to stay inside, to keep the doors locked, to call him if anything else happened. But even as he said it, he knew the locks would not matter. If they wanted to reach his mother, they would reach her. Just like they had reached his girlfriend. Just like they had reached his apartment. The net was closing. The walls were moving in. And Callahan understood with absolute clarity that 48 hours had taught him more about power than 6 years as a cop ever could. Real power was not the gun on his hip or the badge on his chest. Real power was the ability to make an entire system turn against you while the people orchestrating it remained invisible, untouchable. beyond the reach of any law he could enforce. July 7th, 1968. Wells Restaurant, Harlem. Bumpy Johnson collapsed at his usual table during breakfast. Heart attack. Sudden. Final. He died before the ambulance arrived. 3 days later, thousands lined the streets for his funeral. Black suits stretched for 6 blocks. Women in church hats. Children held by parents who wanted them to witness history. The procession moved slow through Harlem like a river of grief and respect combined. Police worked traffic control, showed a level of respect that would have been unthinkable 30 years earlier. Among them stood retired Officer Davidson, 71 years old, who had been a rookie in 1938. He whispered to the young officer beside him, words that carried 3 decades of weight. "This man taught me that real strength is not the gun on your hip. Real strength is making 50,000 people go silent at the same time." The funeral ended. Harlem mourned, then moved forward, carrying the lessons even when the teacher was gone. 5 years later, February 1973, Patrick Callahan died alone in a nursing home in New Jersey. No family at his bedside, no friends. Just a nurse marking time of death on a chart that would be filed and forgotten. His funeral had 11 attendees, no flowers from the department, no eulogy worth remembering. After the service, a nurse approached Callahan's distant cousin with a box. Found this in his room. Inside, 47 letters, handwritten, addressed to Mabel Johnson. Everyone starting with, "I am sorry," written over 25 years. Never mailed. Never sent. Shame preserved in a drawer where it could not grant peace. The cousin threw the box away. The story became legend, passed from father to son, street corner to classroom. In 2025, 87 years later, a professor at Columbia stood before students teaching urban politics. August 1938. Bumpy Johnson versus the NYPD. No shots fired. Just 72 hours of silence that brought a precinct to its knees. What does this teach us? A student in the back spoke. Intelligence beats force. Real power is invisible until too late to fight it. The professor nodded. Bumpy Johnson was not a hero. He was a criminal. But he understood power better than most, and that makes him more dangerous than any saint or villain you will study. The lesson was not glorifying crime. It was understanding how communities protect themselves when systems become predators, how intelligence reshapes reality more than any weapon. That evening, a young man whose great-grandfather witnessed the slap in 1938 walked West 126th Street. The buildings had changed. The markets had new names. But when he reached the spot where Mabel's groceries hit pavement, he stopped. 87 years. The physical evidence was gone. But memory remained because some lessons are too important to forget. His father's words echoed, "Harlem remembers everything, remembers who protected us, remembers that justice sometimes wears a different face than law. Forgetting is how history repeats." The young man stood as sun set over Harlem, painting sky the same colors as 1938 when Bumpy Johnson decided silence was stronger than screaming and patience deadlier than rage. A police siren wailed in the distance, passed without stopping, because even now, 87 years later, certain lessons still governed these streets. Certain memories still shaped how respect was given and boundaries enforced. The red line Bumpy Johnson drew in August 1938 had never been erased. It just became invisible to people who never learned to look for it, and that was exactly how power was supposed to work. Not announced, not visible, just present, waiting for someone to cross it and learn what happens when intelligence meets consequence and the neighborhood remembers everything.